Hello YouTube, this is Sam Gerrans from Qur'anite.com and this is my audio blog. Today I'm going to try to outline some of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing and what it is I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is to explain to people who have not encountered the Qur'an before that it is not necessarily the auxiliary to the religion known as brand Islam. I call it brand Islam because it is a brand. The religion known as Islam, it doesn't grow naturally out of the Qur'an. It is an appendage. It has been created and then attached to the Qur'an. It is not possible to align the Qur'an with the religion known as Islam without twisting and bending key concepts within the Qur'an to meet that requirement. It's the only way it is possible. There is no other way. I know, because I've been through the Qur'an word by word by word and analysed it endlessly. Now, we assume, because we're taught that Muslims believe the Qur'an is the book of the Muslims, this is what they believe, and Islam is the sort of natural embodiment of whatever it is the Qur'an teaches. It's not simply my opinion that this isn't the case, it's demonstrably not the case. I'll give some examples. What do we mean by Islam? Well, what most people mean by Islam, the traditionalists' classical definition of Islam, just for an example, is not in the Qur'an. Nowhere. It comes from a Hadith, it comes from a story, a piece of hearsay written down somewhere between 100 and 200 years later about something which the Prophet Muhammad was supposed to have said. This is like taking our perception of the Battle of Waterloo from hearsay. Somebody told somebody told somebody who told somebody who told somebody who told somebody who heard Napoleon say, or, Wellington, whoever it was. Would you accept that? Would you accept that? I wouldn't. I wouldn't even buy a second-hand fridge on the basis of this sort of quote-unquote evidence. But this is how the brand of Islam operates, and this is what Muslims believe. So to get to what Islam is supposed to be, what Islam is supposed to be is, well, Sunni Islam is to consist of 5 pillars. Now, just to take the first one first, the first pillar, which is supposed to be what's called the shahada, which in English is I bear witness that there is no God but God, and I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God. This statement, which is the defining, initiating statement into brand Islam, is nowhere found in the Qur'an. Nowhere. It doesn't exist. You will not find it. The statement, and we bear witness that thou art the messenger of God, occurs in the Qur'an, and it comes from the mouth of the hypocrites. I didn't make this up. This is what the Qur'an says. So this is the first, this is the statement supposedly of faith, which is the defining statement, which is by which a person embraces brand Islam. The second part, or the next one, generally is to keep the 5 prayers. The 5 prayers occur nowhere in the Qur'an, they don't exist. The word which the Muslim says means prayer is ṣalāt, and nowhere is ṣalāt indicated to mean prayer of any sort in the Qur'an, and there are instances where ṣalāt and its plural, salawat, cannot possibly mean prayer. And in fact, the traditionalist himself is forced to translate in English that word as with values other than prayer where it suits him, because he has to, in order to get through the translation with a straight face. So the idea that Islam, these are just 2 of the 5 supposed pillars of Islam. Well, and they are pillars. They're pillars of religion. That religion is nowhere to be found in the Qur'an. Just gives you some idea that this religion is not found in the Qur'an. So the question is, where does it come from? Well, it comes from a secondary body of literature, a secondary body of text, which is really the foundation of brand Islam. And this is called the Hadith, which is, a Hadith is, in Arabic, is in the singular, and aḥādīth is plural. And Hadith means narration, story, tradition, narrative, an event. And the Hadith were written down in Sunni Islam by Persians. Most Muslims don't know this, but it's true. Al-Bukhari, who is the sort of the Muslims' grand master of Hadith, was from Bukhara. He was a Persian. And actually, all of the compilers of the main so-called sahih, or so-called sound collections, compilations of these narratives were all Persian, and Persia was a defeated nation at this time. The Hadith literature has some good, some bad, and some indifferent content, and that shouldn't surprise us. However, I reject its premise. The premise of the Hadith literature is a so-called science called the science of isnad, and isnad is, well, it's insane actually, but it's like saying that that a chain of transmission, supposedly, if you accept it as being true, which I don't, has a sort of pedigree, that the people involved, their memory was this good, or they are that reliable, or whatever it is. I wouldn't sign a contract to buy a second-hand car on this basis. I wouldn't, and nor would anybody. I mean, we're talking, 6, 8, 9 people sometimes, however many people it is. And anyway, that's not even the point. The point is that the Qur'an itself calls itself, it says that God has sent down the best hadith. Well, if the Qur'an is the best hadith, or contains the best hadith, that means anything, if we believe the Qur'an, anything that is not in the Qur'an is something other than the best hadith. Why would you follow anything other than the best? The Qur'an itself claims to be complete. It claims that it's a full message to the world. It claims that it makes those claims. Well, you can either accept those claims or you can reject them. But I find it incompatible with reason to suggest, as brand Islam does not only suggest, it is actually founded upon this assumption, that some book of revelation which claims to be complete is in fact not complete, because it needs this other stuff to be understood. Well, my position is if the Qur'an is from God and it claims to be complete, then we should accept it on those terms. And if it can be shown to be incomplete, well, then it means it's not from God, doesn't it? You can't have it both ways. But Islam requires you to have it both ways. And that's part of why I don't accept it. Mainstream Islam will have it that unless you follow its religion, you have no business engaging with the Qur'an. Again, this is a blatant contradiction of the Qur'an. The Qur'an says it is a message for all the worlds, for all of humanity. Well, I am a member of humanity, and I have taken the time to read it, and it's a message to me also. I don't accept brand Islam. I don't accept it for the same reason I don't accept Christianity, or Trinitarian Christianity at any rate. My position is that I have studied the Qur'an with care, which it asks you to do, and found it to be complete. If I had found a loophole in it, I would have rejected it. The Qur'an does not require you to follow brand Islam. You cannot follow brand Islam and in a meaningful way implement the Qur'an. They are inimical. They are irreconcilable. I don't mean that to be nasty to Muslims, but it is, it's just a fact. It doesn't matter which part of, the main core of Islam you belong to. The Qur'an isn't calling you to a religion. It doesn't actually mention a religion. Now, the traditionalist will say, see, it doesn't mention a religion. They'll agree with me on this point. They'll say, yes, you're right. The Qur'an doesn't have a religion, but that's why you need this other stuff. I mean, their argument is that the Hadith is the how-to. This is how to implement it. Well, again, I go back to my initial point, which is the Qur'an claims to be complete. And what the Muslims have done, they've repeated the same errors that the Jews made, is in that the Jews claim that Moses received the written Torah, but he also received an oral Torah, another Torah. The Hadith is the Islamic Talmud. Now, were I a Jew, I would be a Karaite Jew. A Karaite Jew is somebody who accepts the Torah, applies himself using his own brain to it, and proceeds on that basis. I don't accept the Hadith. I see no reason to. I'm not promoting the brand Islam, far from it. My biggest problems in life increasingly come from people who are traditionalist Muslims. They refuse to investigate the Qur'an using their own intelligence, and they really don't like it if someone else does so, because they're wedded to a religion which they haven't often really thought about. And that's not unusual. That doesn't surprise me. I live in a society where 9 people out of 10 are like that. I mean, people living in the Western societies today who spout liberal lemming rubbish, have they really thought about it? Did everybody really sit down and decide that this is what we want? We want homosexual marriage, and we want mass immigration, and we want transhumanism, and we want, this whole agenda. Did everybody really sit down and think it through and come to exactly the same conclusions? No, of course not. They were indoctrinated by media and clever people who know how these things work. And the same is true of Muslims. So we shouldn't be overly critical of them. I don't like the word victims, but they are the product, let's say that. They're the product of their environment. The Qur'an itself says if we follow the mass of people, the majority, we will go astray. There's no question. So my position, what I'm selling, if you want to put it that way, is to understand that the Qur'an is a preserved book from God, that it contains the keys of how to be successful in the true sense of the word. I'm not talking about money here. In this life and in the life to come, how to overthrow tyranny. It doesn't contain a religion. And what I'm trying to do is to allow the people who are already thinking. My target audience are those people who understand 9/11 was an inside job, who get it, who already understand that media is totally corrupt, who get these things. I'm not trying to convince Muslims. They've had 1,000 years to think about it. Why would what I've got to say make any difference to them at all? I know that there are some very decent and questioning people among them, and I know that it's very difficult for them to get any sort of connection within the mosques, etc. But they have to persist for themselves and do what they have to do. I'm doing what I have to do. But my goal is not to disabuse brand Islam of its errors. I'm not that foolish. My goal is to bring the Qur'an to the people who are already thinking, who already get it, who have already seen through this matrix, who already understand what a corrupt system this is, and already believe in God to some extent, but are often disillusioned or suspicious of the Bible, as they should be, because there are errors in the Bible. The Qur'an corrects those errors. It doesn't correct those errors and replace them with brand Islam. It just corrects those errors. If you ask me what my religion is finding truth. It's not that I am now a this or a that. I'm just doing what I've always done, which is research, verify, think, and act on that basis. I know that there aren't going to be many people who are going to get this. I do understand this. I'm not stupid. But I'm not looking for numbers. I'm not even looking for membership. I'm not looking even for anything. I'm just doing what I'm doing. And I know that there are people out there who are looking for something worthwhile. And I would say to them, consider the Qur'an, read this translation. You can download it for free. Consider the evidence. Weigh it up. If you're intelligent people, you can do that. If you find errors in what I've done and you can demonstrate on the basis of logic, the Arabic language, and real history that there are errors there, show me. I'll willingly review it. And if I'm wrong, I will hold my hands up and say, yeah, you're right. I'm not that interested in who's right. I'm interested in what's right. But I will not be bludgeoned or blackmailed or threatened out of using my brain by people who won't use theirs. I must do what I must do, and that's all there is to it. That's really all that I want to say for now. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Qur'an using the button in the top right hand corner. I also encourage you to sign up for the Qur'anite Plus newsletter on the site to get regular micro updates. Like if you like, comments if you have something to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And remember, life is short, eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.